Hello everyone, it's good to see you all back. Today we've got something special for you Warlocks out there. If you ever want to harness the raw, unbridled power of Arc in Destiny 2, this is the build you've been waiting for. We're talking about the Sanguine Alchemy exotic, Grand Overture, and the insane potential of Arc compounding mod. It's a storm of pure energy that can decimate anything in its path. So let's dive into how to create the perfect storm and obliterate your enemies with the combined might of Arc energy and Warlock Build. So starting with the general aim and exotic of the build, we aim to provide an excellent Arc dungeon focused build that will enhance and escalate damage as we go along, while also providing a rapidly fast ability cooldown for everything on hand. For this we will be using Sanguine Alchemy and Grand Overture. Starting with our exotic armor, Sanguine Alchemy, with its exotic effect, Blood Magic, it states, while standing in any rift, a damaging target will mark it. You deal extra damage to marked targets and gain additional bonus damage with weapons that have a damage type matching your equipped super. Weapon finder blows while standing in any rift pauses the rift countdown, extending its duration. With Sanguine now updated to be more beneficial in content, I've decided to apply its effects into the current build to enhance my heavy and special weapons damage by X amount. For this I will be using Grand Overture with Sanguine, since the two work in perfect tandem with building up damage quickly. At the same time, the ×4 surge buff allows me a quick boost of damage that is applied whenever I like, while the 10% debuff can be stacked with other things for even more damage. It's one of the best exotics to use as of right now when doing dungeons, as it requires little input to activate it, and its pros heavily outweigh any cons it may have. Our second exotic is the Grand Overture, with its exotic effect, Wrath of the Colossus, which states, heavy slug launcher that charges then fires full auto while the trigger is held. Grand Overture main effect is to build up missiles over time and then use them at max stacks for a huge boost in DPS. For us to make this weapon work, I've combined the weapon with Sanguine effect and also the Arc Compounder mod for a 15% debuff towards blinded targets. Now it's important to note, if you want Arc Compounder to work with the weapon, you will need to either unlock its catalyst and complete it, since it can trigger the blinding effect off the bat, or have the Retinal Burn mod available and use it while building it up. The latter is the best way to go about it, since everyone can unlock it, and with Ionic Traces and Elemental Charge mod on hand, you can maintain this debuff activation phase for as long as you like. For aspects and fragments we then have the following: Arc Soul, where using your rift will generate an Arc Soul that fires at target. Electrostatic Mind, where defeating a target with Arc abilities or jolted targets creates an Ionic Trace. Collecting traces makes you amplified. Sparkle Shock, where your Arc Grenades jolt targets. Sparkle Beacons, where while amplified, using an Arc special weapon or heavy ammo, final blows creates a blinding explosion. Sparkle Ions, where defeating a jolted targets creates Ionic Traces. And Sparkle Recharge, where upon reaching critical health, your melee, class ability, and grenades are rapidly regenerated. Since Arc Compounding will be used by my special weapon and heavy weapon, it's best advised to invest as much as possible into Ionic Traces as possible. The reason being is that Arc builds are capable of getting all their abilities back fairly fast when Ionic Traces are active, which in our case will provide a much more aggressive playstyle when dealing with bosses. Now Arc Souls with Electrostatic Mind are two combos that will grant easy Ionic Traces access upon activation, since we will be using our rifts a lot with Sanguine Alchemy debuff and buff effect. We also have Spark of Ions and Trace Evidence mod on hand, which will help with covering the rest of the Ionic Traces we get over time. But I do want to disclaim that having Spark of Beacons in the build is actually a must, since we will be using Concussive Reload mod all the time. Now Beacons is great against all enemies we face, but not against bosses, as it requires kills to trigger it. This is not a problem, since Arc Compounding will fill that void with Grand Overture. But Beacon alone is still a must, as we can utilize Arc Compounding against everyone else we face still. A 15% debuff towards enemies is great either way you look at it, and upon combining that with Sanguine Alchemy ×4 surge buff and the extra 10% weaken against marked enemies, and you'll get a well-oiled build that makes it more functional in all types of content and not just the one. That's how I see it though, so it might not be something you want, and of course you do have the Concussive Reload mod if you want, but it's good to keep this all in mind. For the mods and stats, we then have Resilience and Discipline marked with the highest priorities for the build. Recovery is also important at tier 7, but naturally can be left at tier 5 or below if you wish. Resilience we have ours at tier 10 for 30% damage reduction. I've removed damage reduction mods as I wanted this to be a fast moving build that focuses purely on damage. However, this can backfire if the bosses you face or enemies are more aggressive and can deal more damage than you do. If you are happy with removing a reserve mod and then adding a elemental resistance mod and a recuperation mod for the boots, this should bolster our defenses more. Alternatively, adding the Spark of Resistance fragment for a 25% damage reduction is also a faster way around this, if you wish. A discipline we have ours at tier 10 for a 1 minute 1 second cooldown via pulse grenades. Not much is needed to know about the grenade of choice, since it's one of the most powerful grenades to use in general. Since my build will be relying on ion tracers being created and used at max, I have found pulse grenades to be the best for pumping them out with Spark of Shock and ions on hand. I have also added the Spark of Recharge, which will provide a massive boost of cooldown energy for my abilities for a trade-off of critical health in the process. This here should be fairly enough to support the build for its needs, while still being operational strong against all enemies we face. Now here are some of the additional mods for further cooldown along the way. Momentum Transfer ×1 for a 12% melee buff, Impact Induction ×1 for a 12% grenade buff, Bolstering Detonation ×1 for a 12% class ability buff, and Distribution ×1 for a 3% all ability buff, although swapping this out for the Reaper mod may actually be more beneficial along the way. For the extra additional mods, we have the following: Harmonic Siphon for creating orbs of power via matching elemental weapons, Heavy and Special Ammo Finder, Reserves and Scavenger mods for a heavy and special weapon, Charged Up for a +1 armor charge, Arc Holster for auto-loading arc weapons when stowed away, Elemental Charge where picking up an elemental pickup will grant you armor charge, a Powerful Attraction for automatically collecting orbs of power when using class ability, and then lastly, a Special Finisher where finishing a target will produce a special ammo brick for a trade-off of charged up armor charges. So as we have covered our exotic heavy weapon, I will then advise you to pick some suitable weapons for the build. What I recommend are all optional, so please keep this in mind. For our primary is the Lost Signal with auto-loaded holster and vorpal weapon. This will be an on and off weapon to use depending on the boss encounter I am in, as I will be relying on Indebted Kindness the most within the build. Running a dual special loadout is possible with the kit, as long as you have special ammo mods on hand to help. With my current build, it will overall increase the amount of damage I do against bosses by a fairly good amount. However, running out of ammo is fairly easy if the boss encounter is very long, so I would advise you to get the Patron of Lost Causes Scout Rifle with triple tap and vorpal, as it can at least be useful against everything you face, while also saving on special ammo needed. Our second primary, we have the Indebted Kindness with Beacon Rounds and Adagio. A highly recommended role to farm for. The following is being paired up with Spark of Beacon's Fragments for the blinding effect, and then activating Arc Compounding mod and the Trace Evidence mod for a nice amount of ion traces and extra blinding. You don't need to get the same role like I do, but having something similar does come in handy when you want a specific weapon to have multiple roles in the current build, and as shown, this weapon here does quite a lot. With these pieces in place, you'll be able to amplify your arc powers to an insane level. You'll be able to spam out your abilities, dish out extra damage with Grand Overture, enhance your weapons with Sanguine Alchemy, and keep the storm raging on the battlefield. Just like many arc builds we have done, we will want to make sure Chaos Reach is available at the moment's notice upon engaging a boss encounter. I tend to like to start things off with my grenade launcher if I have one, or use up all my abilities, and then super to escalate the damage as soon as possible. I then follow this up with my heavy and activate its missile attack to trigger the arc compounding effect for the extra 15% debuff towards the target. Your rift will also be active, and plus you just need one missile to trigger this, but once it's done, you can then build up your fleet of missiles once more and unleash an unholy amount of damage just from Grand Overture alone. Rinse and repeat, and you can get an easy 2-phase, maybe 1-phase if you're lucky. All of this shown is very possible for the player to achieve against pretty much any boss you face, and it works wonders with how fast you can garner your ability energy with the amount of ion traces that can get created back to you. The amount of damage I've done with the build can vary at times, but my highest has always been around a 4 to 5 million, which is incredible for the small amount of items being used. It's quite honestly a shockingly strong build that is straight to the point with damage, and does not require players to use prismatic combos to achieve anything else more. I thoroughly enjoyed this build, and can see this build being useful in a wide number of content, which does include raids, GM, story contents, and even PvP. And with how flexible some of these fragments and weapons can be, I can see this being a fan favourite for the new kin to the game. So there we have it. I hope you all enjoyed the build breakdown. If you have any thoughts on the content shared, then please leave a comment below. While if you enjoy the content and want more of these videos, then leave a like and a sub while you're here. A dim link for the build is located below in the pinned section, and I do advise you to check out my playlist for more. It was great sharing today's video with you all, and I hope to see you again soon.